This is the day that has been given to us. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. My name is Reverend Kathleen Rolenz, serving as your interim senior minister and sharing today's service with worship associate Sara Ford. Welcome all. Welcome to Unity Church-Unitarian. To all who are joining us for the first time, our visitors and guests, those of you who are watching us online this morning, all are welcome here. Your gifts and your wounds are welcome. Visitors are also invited to attend a Finding Yourself at Unity class immediately following today's service. That's from 10:15 to 11:15 in the Gannett Room. And the conversation is going to be about religious education for children, youth, and adults. And this morning, we want to welcome One Voice mixed chorus that you just heard. Weren't they fabulous? Thank you. Thank you. And more to come. One Voice mixed chorus is Minnesota's own and one of North America's largest LGBTQ and straight allies community chorus. Their offices are located right here in the building, and we are delighted that they are sharing some of their selections with us today. So once again, welcome.
We kindle our chalice flame this morning, accompanied with words by Reverend Rebecca Savage, Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Rockville, Maryland. We light our flaming chalice as a beloved people united in love and thirsting for restorative justice. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light on our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly toward our highest ideals. Come, let us worship together, joining heart, mind, spirit, and voice in song. We are a gentle and generous people, but let us not forget our anger. Our vision of the beloved community must stand against a vision that would allow the privilege of the few to be accepted as just and even holy.
Our religious vision must again and again ask, who is my neighbor? And strive always to include more and more of us.
As we intone the words that gave birth to this nation, we the people, we are and we should be both a gentle and angry people.
Holding all that we love, there is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for family members in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days, and by those who rise above heartbreak to challenge oppression in all of its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation as together we live into our longing to embody and help build the beloved community. Will you pray with me for all these we now name? Mike and Becky Rose Schwab are delighted to announce the birth of another Redeemer. Marisol Tomawe Rose Maldonado Schwab was born on April 11th, 2023, to Rose Schwab and Anna Maldonado. We hold in prayer Rich Lau's family. His mother, Yi Ling, has made the difficult transition from dementia care to hospice. And Rich is grateful that we are holding him and his family, in our prayers. We send love and healing for Sarah Armstrong's husband, Bill, who had an aortic aneurysm last Wednesday and is in a hospital in Florida. The good news is the doctors are very positive and remain hopeful about his recovery. And sadly, we're reporting that Bob Steller is at Hennepin Healthcare after falling on Wednesday afternoon outside the Minneapolis Institute of Art. He was heading into a class. He fell and suffered a cardiac arrest, head injuries, and a fractured spine. His condition is very serious. Please hold his family in care and in prayer. I now invite you to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those that you would like to name in worship today. Christine, my brother, Kelly. Pray with me now. O beloved, that spirit which imbues all with light and darkness, joy and sorrow, the love which holds us when we are born and cradles us when we die, be with us now. We are holding so much, O thou Spirit. In our daily lives, we are balancing the needs of children, of parents, and of aging parents who are changing, of friends who are struggling, of loved ones who are dying. We rejoice and we celebrate and are amazed at the birth and adoption of new lives as their innocence reminds us of the aching beauty and power of the world. We hold in care all those named and those unnamed, and of the many movements in our world which inspire us to co-create a world of care, of attention to the most vulnerable among us, to the ones who live among the shadows of a culture gone mad with greed and riddled with despair. Help us find in the quiet of this hour a respite and resolve to be the redeemers our world so desperately needs. We hold in special care today the lives of 5 persons killed in another mass shooting in Texas. There are no words, but let us channel our despair or our rage into action, into increased pressure, so that we no longer have to hold victims of gun violence in prayer every week. May we rise from our hopelessness to insist on health and healing. May we find in this hour the inspiration to find the power and the potential to make our corner of the world ever closer to the vision of beloved community. And we do that by never forgetting there is indeed a love which holds us and has never broken faith with us and never will.
There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding on. There is a love, all that we love. There is a love holding all we
Jonathan C. Richardson, this is from March 13th in 2023 in The Atlantic. Reverend Richardson is the pastor of Cornerstone United Methodist Church of New Orleans and the author of Taking Jesus Seriously, Messages for a Deeper Christian Life. This article appeared in the March issue, as I said. The great Frederick Douglass, steeped in his crusade against slavery on the idea of natural rights, steeped his crusade. When Malcolm X spoke the now famous phrase, "by any means necessary," he was emphasizing a demand for the human rights of African Americans to be respected. The Black Lives Matter movement may have jettisoned the organizational structure of previous freedom-fighting organizations like the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but Black Lives Matter has maintained ACLC's use of rights language as a viable part of strategy for change. No Black preacher worth their salt, including yours truly, can long avoid referencing the poetic Jeffersonian line, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." In the social ethic of individual rights, people claim their rights over and against other people's in an argument that quickly leads into a trap. Are my rights more important than yours? Whose rights matter more, the person who wants to carry a gun or the person threatened by the proliferation of guns in our society? The person who says a hateful thing on social media or the person forced to listen to such speech without recourse? When rights are taken to be the fundamental moral reality, we are encouraged to take an ultimately degrading perspective on society. Writes Esther Reed, no real society can exist when its citizens' only way of relating is in terms of non-interference. The language of rights encourages us to live as if we had no common interests or beliefs.
As a child, one of the most delicious freedoms I remember was being set loose for several hours at the Akron Public Library every Saturday morning, learning how to use a card catalog, looking up any topic I could think about, exploring books without parental supervision, exposed me to worlds I never knew existed. It was an early step towards developing my own independent thinking. And of course, I looked at the books in my own home, especially the ones which were tucked away, not intended for children's eyes. At age 8, I read The Happy Hooker, and I learned more about sex than was covered in the one conversation I had with my dad. I knew intuitively that if something really troubled me, I could talk to my parents about it. But there was something really important to me about forming my own thoughts, impressions, and opinions about what I was reading. Now, I understand that today parents have a bewildering array of decisions to make about what their children are exposed to. It's not just the books, it's multiple varieties of media, the internet, easy access to pornography. And there are indeed predators on the internet and damage and harm to children and their families. And that's real and not to be discounted. But there is another danger that is, I think, actually greater and more troubling than what I just mentioned. And that's the dangers of censorship in the form of book banning under the banner of parental rights. And that is a more troubling trend that we should be concerned about. Because it's not just about what children are or are not reading. At the heart of the matter is a struggle that goes beyond books and libraries, but a struggle over who gets to determine what constitutes the common good in our republic, whose liberties include the right to think and to make decisions for ourselves. Now, recently, a group of parents in Homer, Alaska, asked their local library to remove books which are intended to, this is quote, to indoctrinate children in LGBTQ plus ideologies from the children's section and put them on a restricted shelf. Parents who do not wish for their children to stumble across confusing ideas can't let their kids browse without close supervision, they say. So again, it's part of a larger movement about parents' rights, which on the surface seems quite innocuous. The liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, and care of their children is a fundamental right. So this is a quote from those folks in Homer, Alaska. And probably no parent would disagree with that. But the rub here, as we start down this road of exploring rights and whose rights are sacrificed, is that the rights being described are almost entirely one-sided. These rights are an attempt to end any exposure to the realities of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, or any discussion about gender identity or sexual orientation. And interestingly enough, parental rights are never invoked by parents who want their children to learn more about race, identity, and the less noble parts of the American story. We never hear about the rights of parents who want schools to offer a wider selection in libraries or more books and materials about gender identity to children. Instead, this louder call for parents' rights is not about parents at all. So, the question of rights is not only a political one, it is deeply and intimately connected to what we value and how we shape our moral understanding of how the world should be. So some parents believe that a children's book depicting, say, a gay pride parade is an attempt to indoctrinate their children into a gay ideology. And they believe it is their right as a parent not to have their children exposed to something they find offensive in a publicly funded institution. A person who is trans believes that in a free and democratic society, they should be free to express themselves in whatever way is consistent with their own identity and should be recognized with dignity in the public square. So how do these two seemingly opposite rights live side by side with one another? Thinking about our more recent rights conflict, although this is pretty recent, in fact, as well, has been the struggle between those who insist that it is their right not to wear a mask or to not get vaccinated against a deadly virus, as opposed to those who said, but my health is a right, and your insistence on not taking precautions could literally cost me my life. And throughout the course of the pandemic and even to this day, I know families, organizations, churches that were literally split apart into masks, anti-masks, vax, anti-vax stances. You could say they're all legitimate rights, all involving people in a seemingly irreconcilable conflict with one another. So I have to continue to believe there is a path through this Gordian knot if we can muster the energy and the vision to not only discover it, but to practice it. So before we explore this path together, I want to acknowledge that it's a hard path to walk and that I am no master at doing it. I aspire to walk or roll along this path on a regular basis, but I find myself falling into binary thinking. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to prove through the force of my intellectual arguments how wrong you are. Or even, it's my way or the highway. So taking this hard stance on one side of binary thinking is easy to do, in some ways, because I believe there are many hard-won rights which should never be reversed. Black people, brown people, indigenous people, people of color have fought hard to gain the same rights afforded to straight, white, land-owning men. Disability advocates had to literally crawl up the steps of the nation's capital to demonstrate the ways in which the country was not accessible to them. GLBTQAI people came out of the closet and into the legislators at peril, at great peril, to protect their relationships, their families, their children, their jobs. Women must still prove that they can run a family and a country. So these are rights I will continue to advocate for, to call out, to stand for. But there are some ways in which my own stridency about these rights is counterproductive to finding a middle way through the news noise, through the competing narratives about whose rights are being sacrificed on the altar of either left progressive politics or right conservative values. These language of rights, they often get us into trouble because there is a presumption that if I get my rights, then somebody else is not getting theirs. So in this battle over human rights, the progressive side of our society frames questions like this. Who has the right to drive down a street with a broken taillight and not have that encounter end in death? Who should have the right to have an abortion without harassment? Who has the right to discern what gender they feel inside and have that gender affirmed and respected regardless of what was assigned to them at birth? But then here's another set of rights. Who has the right to pray to God in public schools without shame or apology? Who has the right to own and carry a gun without the government telling me what I can and cannot do or purchase? Who has the right to build a business that creates local jobs and run it in the way I see fit without oppressive regulations? Who has the right to not have books in public schools or public funded libraries that I find offensive and do not want my children to be exposed to? And then there's the classic question. Who has the right to shout fire in a crowded theater? No one does. Because I think we can all agree to do so would put human lives in peril, even more so than the actual fire itself. Yet it does feel like those of us who identify as progressives are constantly trying to point out and put out fires in corners of theaters that the patrons don't want to look at or don't even know exist. Fires that threaten the most marginalized people in the theater, those with the least amount of political and social power. Those are the ones whose rights are most likely to be sacrificed to support and sustain the culture of some of the people in the theater. A culture that progressive politics and liberal religion in a republic has a right to challenge and peacefully encourage to change. The polarization around whose rights get to be dominant in cultural norms or enforced through legislation is increasingly fraught. And as I was thinking about this topic in the sermon, it made me wonder, on what am I willing to compromise for the sake of others who don't agree with me? What are the issues on which we simply cannot compromise? Whose rights am I willing to sacrifice for my vision of beloved community? So for me, I know this doesn't speak to all in this room, but for me, I'm guided by the response of one of the world's greatest spiritual teachers, whose teachings some of our more conservative friends would cite as the inspiration for their vision of beloved community. In the book of Matthew 25, 40 through 45, Jesus is teaching a crowd about what the kingdom of heaven looks like and how you get there. And he says, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." And then he says to those at his left hand, "For I was hungry, you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. Naked, you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me." And then they will answer, "Lord, when was it we saw you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick and in prison and did not take care of you?" And then he will answer them, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me." So Jesus' vision of societal salvation is based on works of compassion, of elevating the rights of those most marginalized. So there is a smooth and middle path we can walk on together and say that everyone's feelings are valid, everyone's opinion should be equally respected, and that if we all just gave in a little, could we not live together in harmony and peace? Well, my struggle to find the path has led me back to the very source that many conservatives claim as the foundation for their lives and values. So if conservative voices who claim that their rights are being violated would take Jesus' words seriously, it is clear to me that what he is calling for is what we would call radical practice of decentering. Decentering whiteness as the basis for all things good and holy, decentering patriarchy and its accompanying insistence on power and control, decentering cisgender and heteronormativity as the standard bearer for all gender expression or sexual affiliation. Decentering does not mean eliminating or even devaluating. It means expanding the circle. It means understanding and the practice of living within a society that was, in theory, meant to be an expression of democratic inclusion. So as I struggle with this concept of rights and finding a middle path together with people with disparate beliefs about whose rights should be sacrificed, I go back to the concept of harm. Now, I don't like the word very much because it's a small word used to describe a vast array of experiences. And not all harms are the same. A skinned knee is not a compound fracture. A bruise to the skin is not a melanoma. So when I think, for example, about the most recent attack on our trans kids and families, or the movement to ban drag shows from public venues, I look at who is being harmed the most. Whose child is really being harmed by having a trans kid sit next to them in school? And how does that compare with the high rate of bullying and attempted or completed suicides among our queer and trans youth? Who is really being harmed by seeing a drag show? Seriously, who is the snowflake here? As my colleague, Reverend Mark Bellatini, once wrote, he said, "The point is there is no good to be found in any of these oppressions. There is nothing moral, ethical, right, religious, or spiritual about ever singling any group out and denying them the ordinary access to rights and privileges enjoyed by the majority. What scoundrel is going to offer me a list of groups of people who should be oppressed by law, language, and social sanction? Which group should not have access to good education, good health care, a safe neighborhood, and I would add a safe place to use a restroom? Who gets to rise to the top and who must sink to the bottom? Who gets to be first? Who dares?" End quote. So I must confess that when I think about the rights of those I hold dear, I want to double down on my separateness. But here's the line that really challenged me in this article that you heard an excerpt from this morning by Richardson. Richardson's quoting a 20th century philosopher, James K.A. Smith, who writes this, quote, "We inhabit the world not primarily as thinkers or even believers, but more effective, embodied creatures who make our way in the world more by feeling our way around it. Rights language is centered in reason. It starts with the premise that reason, not love, is the fundamental mark of our humanity. It begins with the mind that reasons, not the body that loves. And then Richardson continues, he says, I confess that I have been so absorbed in defending my version of rights, which I believe were necessary and important, not only for myself, but for others, that I forgot that we matter because we are embodiments of love, that we are free for and with each other. And this is what I forgot to say to the anti-vaxxers and the anti-maskers, that I belong to you and you belong to me. And that's frightening and hard to live, even harder to live than figuring out whose rights are being violated when I ask you to wear a mask. End quote. I have one friend who believes the 2020 election was stolen, who supports Ron DeSantis' Don't Say Gay bill, who has hinted that COVID was a government conspiracy and that liberal wokeness is its own kind of creeping fascism that should be guarded against. It's hard to say sometimes, but I love this friend, and I choose not to sacrifice this friendship on the altar of my own liberal and progressive values. Sometimes I hate the conversations we have. They make me angry and depressed and sad, and at the same time, I can't ever forget Dr. Martin Luther King's words when he wrote, I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And although it is difficult, I still believe that I belong to you and you belong to me, and that the only way we can be free is for and with one another. It's got to start somewhere. May it start with us, by beginning again and again and again to stand up in love for the rights of those most marginalized. May it be so.
Our support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. The contributions we make enable us to do the work we have pledged to do within our church community and out in the world. Each Sunday, the majority of our offering is passed on to community partners with whom we share common cause. Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with Freedom School, held each summer in the Rondo Education Complex. It is a free 6-week program for students in grades kindergarten through 8. Freedom School provides nutritious meals, addresses pandemic learning loss, reading and math, connects learning through lessons in community and personal responsibility, music, field trips, and fun. This collection will buy culturally appropriate books for the summer 2023 program. Will the ushers please come forward? Let us give as generously as we can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community.
hope that you found rich meaning in today's service. You are invited to stay through the postlude, to stay seated through the postlude, and then Sarah and I would be pleased to greet you on your way to the parish hall for refreshments and conversation. And while you're at the parish hall, do stop by the Evergreen Quilters sale in the parish hall today. 100% of the benefits, or the proceeds, will benefit our community partners serving families. I also wanted to remind you that voting for the ministerial search team, which is the team charged to present a candidate for the lead senior minister position, is now open. If you are a voting member of the congregation, you should have received a link to the ballot this morning. We ask that you cast your ballot by May 7th at 3 o'clock p.m., by 3 o'clock p.m. And on Sunday, May 14th, the board and the congregation will install the 2023-2024 ministerial search team and charge them with the search task. However, the congregation will have a charge as well. So please join me and Unity trustees this Wednesday, 7:10 p.m., to review the congregation's charge and responsibilities in this upcoming search process. There are many opportunities for you to love, serve, connect, and grow. And through our acts of serving and acts of caring and justice, we strive to build a new way of living and loving and service that includes all. So let's join together in our closing hymn. We are building a new way. This benediction is from my beloved colleague, Reverend Dr. Hope Johnson. She writes, "We are one, a diverse group of proudly kindred spirits, here not by coincidence, but because we choose to journey together, learning to love our neighbors, learning to love ourselves, apologizing and forgiving with humility, being forgiven through grace, creating the beloved community. Together, we are one. Go in peace this day and all days."